Best-selling author Tess Gerritsen took an unusual route to her writing career. As an anthropology student at Stanford University, she catalogued centuries-old remains. Later, she trained and worked as a doctor, and only started writing fiction when on maternity leave. Her first novel, a romantic thriller, was published in 1987. But it wasn't until she turned her hand to medical thrillers with Harvest in 1996 that she became a New York Times bestseller. Her most recent thrillers, Body Double, Vanish, and The Mephisto Club, have all been worldwide bestsellers. When not writing, Tess continues to travel the world, driven by her fascination with ancient cultures and bizarre natural phenomena. How much do you identify with your main characters, Dr. Maura Isles and Detective Jane Rizzoli?
Maura Isles is me in my books. She is very much like me in a lot of ways, both in our medical training and in the kind of personality she is. I think of her as being very logical, fairly introspective, and not particularly outgoing. So a lot of the biographical details that I include in the book are right from my life. When you read about Maura, you're reading about me. Jane is the complete opposite. I certainly don't have the boldness or the forthrightness that Jane Rizzoli has.
Do you draw on your own experiences when researching and writing your novels?
When I started off writing medical suspense, one thing my agent told me, and I've taken it to heart since then, is readers want to know secrets. They want to know what goes on behind the doors of the operating room and the autopsy room. And since I am a doctor, I can introduce those secrets. So I try very hard to be a translator in medical matters. I show them what it's like to go into the operating room and to cut skin. I tell them what blood smells like. I tell them what doctors are thinking as the blood is pouring out of the abdomen. It's not something that everybody can talk about with any authority. And I think it's one of the things that maybe makes my books a little bit seemingly more clinical and maybe a little more gruesome. It's because I've been there and I've seen those things.
I've heard that you base your novels on real events, which makes me worry about a specific episode in Vanish when one of the characters, who's been pronounced dead, wakes up in the morgue. Tell me this doesn't happen in everyday life.
It happens more often than we'd like to think about. Vanish was inspired by a true story. It was an article in the newspaper about a young woman who was found dead in a bathtub. There were empty pill bottles by her side, so the police assumed it was a drug overdose and they didn't need to investigate. They zipped the woman into a body bag and she was sent to the morgue where she woke up a few hours later. I was quite horrified by that and decided to do a news search to find out how often this happens, and found case after case, at least in the United States. There was a young boy who had his death certificate signed just before somebody realized he was still breathing. There was a young man who was hit by a car in Georgia, spent a night in the refrigerator before anybody realized he was still alive. And I have a friend who was declared dead in the hospital, was being wheeled to the morgue when the orderly bumped up against a doorway. My friend woke up and the orderly turned right around and brought him right back to the intensive care unit. As a doctor, I can understand how this happens. When a patient has just died, it's usually the nurses who tell us, and the nurses have decided already this person is gone. So we show up in the room, and very often there are grieving family members. It's very noisy, it's very uncomfortable, and we don't listen as long as we should for the heartbeat. So I do think it happens often enough, and in fact, my literary agent has a funny story. She said, on Nantucket, where she grew up, it happens all the time. They have a nursing home, and apparently 3 nursing home residents were declared dead and sent to the morgue where they woke up. It got to the point where on Nantucket, the local morgue was known as the House of Rejuvenation.